Today, we are going to be greeted by Karishma Mehta, and she has an awesome background in the IT security field. She's been in this field for over 15 years. She's worked with NASA. She has her doctorate from George Mason University, and if you can name it, she's probably done it. So what I would like for you guys to do is go ahead and first of all, give her a round of applause. Second of all, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in the group chat or the Q&A section, and we'll save them until the end of the presentation, and then she'll answer them as best as you can. And with that being said, Karishma, please go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Karishma, and thank you so much for a great introduction. I am so excited to be here. I have been in information security world for more than 2 decades now, and I'm so happy to bring blockchain technology and its use cases to you. I'm a lifelong learner, and I love evaluating different technologies and how we can leverage them effectively. I will not be talking about any vendor, as this talk just represents my independent research. Blockchain and Bitcoin sounds very fancy. Well, it is. It is a true hype. Generally, in our industry, we see a grand and snazzy picture, and when we dig in, we find it's really not a big deal. It's just a hype. Well, today's topic is real, and it's super interesting, especially how I got curious about this topic. According to the cyber venture, ransomware attacks were on the rise, and they have been estimated to cost globally about $20 billion by 2021. A single ransomware attack can demand up to 377,000. That's a big number. I presented ransomware topic about 2 years ago and started wondering why don't we use the same technology to protect ourselves against ransomware, the one that attackers are using to infect us with. Little twisted, but that's how I got interested in. In ransomware, the attacker would generally ask for ransom in order to get the decryption key for our encrypted data. The reason we are falling in for this trap, because most likely the general scenario would be we have a central database or just a one copy of database, fail to do the backup. So now we are desperate, and most likely we will pay for this. So this is how we can leverage blockchain technology. So let's dive in and understand what is this technology and what are the use cases. So first we'll have introduction. We'll talk about the key components of blockchain. We'll talk about the blockchain architecture. We'll talk about the use cases of blockchain and blockchain risk, and then finally a conclusion. So let's look at the introduction. What is a blockchain? A blockchain is a shared, immutable, and distributed ledger that uses cryptography, private and public key, and hashes and computers. It can create, access, share, transfer, track, and secure assets and transactions represented as a block to fulfill a certain function. So there are 2 key advantages listed on this slide from the get-go. No single point of failure and no intermediaries. It is a peer-to-peer system that enables users to maintain a ledger of transaction that is replicated and synchronized over multiple users. So per US respondents 2020, where 92% said cyber attack volume have increased in last 12 months. 97% said that the business have suffered a security breach in last 12 months. 84% said attacks have become more sophisticated, right? We all live this as a cybersecurity professional every day. This is the story of our life. One such promising technology is blockchain. Recently, NASA decided to implement a blockchain technology in order to boost cybersecurity and prevent denial of service and other attacks, which we will talk about later in this presentation. When approximately over 1,000 attacks were unleashed daily, no industry is safe from hacking. Blockchain is a popular solution, and many industries can leverage and can take advantage of it. So according to ISG Research Blockchain, 40% of information technology can take advantage of this technology. 31% of information security can take advantage of that. And as we go down through this graph, we can see how many different technologies can leverage that. I want to have an important note here. A lot of people have come and then they ask like, okay, well, is Bitcoin and blockchain are the same? Well, they are not same. In 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto introduced the Bitcoin. A Bitcoin is a digitally produced medium of exchange. Blockchain is an underlying technology that made the accounting for Bitcoin possible. There are several popular blockchain technologies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dash, Zcash. So in a nutshell, Bitcoin is a currency and blockchains is the accounting system, the framework behind it. Blockchains are distributed cryptographic network of nodes. And then we will further go down. So please keep this in mind as I go through the presentation. So now let's talk about the key components of the blockchain. So we have a sequence of blocks, we have digital trust, we have smart contracts, and we have open source. And we will look at each one in the detail. So sequence of blocks, right? It's a creation and transfer of unique digital objects in a decentralized structure. Then we have a digital trust. So encryption, transparency, verifiability, immutability, all of these things, they make up digital trust. And we'll talk more about this. Then we have a smart contracts. We have programmable action that can be traced. This is one of the biggest benefit of blockchain. This allows us to conduct a business with a global organization. We do not have to worry about different currency or different regulations in a different country. So this is fantastic. It's a programmable language. And then we have open source, which is promoting accessibility and inclusiveness. So let's dive in to each one in a detail. So now let's take a look at what are the sequence of blocks are. This is the core fundamental of blockchain. This is a simplified example of how blocks are chained to form the blockchain. As we can see that each block contains a header and a number of transactions. The transactions in a blocks are hashed together in a fixed length output, which is added to block header. After the creation of the first block, every subsequent valid block must contain hash output of the previous block header. The hash of the previous block header, which contained in every block, serves as the chain that links every valid block to the one before it, and thus linking every block to the previous block, creating a chain. Thus, blockchain is established. So this is the basic structure of blockchain. The second thing comes is digital trust. So in the simplest form, encryption is to convert the data in some unreadable format. Once we create the data in unreadable format, it doesn't matter if it's available in a plain sight, as nobody can make any sense out of it. It is that simple. This helps in protecting the privacy while sending the data from the sender to receiver. On the receiver side, data can be decrypted and can be brought back to its original form. The reverse of encryption is decryption. This is a game of encryption and decrypting with keys and algorithms. My assumption is that our audience is very well aware of the cryptography, as there are so many different types of algorithms that they exist right now. The main ones that are being referenced throughout this presentation are public and private key encryption. The other main feature is the hash function. A hash function is a function that can be used to map the data off of any variable size to a fixed size value. The values returned by hash functions are called hash values or digest. So the main idea that I want to deliver here is that the fixed value that's generated is irreversible, meaning we cannot go from fixed length to its original text. The hash is attached to its original message, signed by the digital signature. Upon decryption, if hash does not match, it means that the message is altered, right? It's changed. And we'll talk about how this is connecting with integrity later. The another feature is non-repudiation. Non-repudiation is the assurance that someone cannot deny when message is encrypted with a digital signature, and only the person who has decryption key can decrypt it. If message gets decrypted, then we know the only person who could have encrypted this message must have its corresponding key, and more importantly, they cannot deny sending this message. Because of this inherent framework, blockchain can have following characteristics. It is decentralized. Transactions in the blockchains are processes and validated by consensus of most network nodes. We'll talk more about this later. It has immutability. Because each block are linked with each other using a cryptographic hash, any change in one block will impact all of the subsequent blocks. And additionally, blockchain is immutable, or in other words, tamper-proof. When data is written to blockchain, no one, not even a system admin, can change it. So this is great for the audit purpose. If a malicious attacker needs to change all the succeeding blocks, which is computationally very difficult because a chained block are replicated over multiple nodes. Can we imagine a hacker or a group of hackers going through multiple nodes and changing data everywhere, fooling everyone in the network that this is correct? Probably very complex task to achieve. The next key component blockchain offers is transparency. The ledger is only updated when most of the nodes reach the consensus. Changes in the network is visible to everyone. Then we have traceability. Because it's open, we can trace any transactions event. Each update in the state of an asset can be tracked down all the way back to its origin. Thus, because of cryptography in its foundation, blockchain has a very solid, very solid framework. So now let's talk about the smart contracts. The smart contracts are a line of code that are stored on a blockchain and automatically executed when predetermined terms and conditions are met. The smart contracts code facilitates, verifies, and enforces the negotiation or executes the transaction. It is the simplest form of decentralized automation. It also reduces the reliance on trusted intermediaries and thus lowering the transaction cost. It can also provide enhanced speed and accuracy of the process. Because of its universal applicability, we talked about the global transactions and doing business globally. We don't have to worry about the languages or different laws. So I think that that's pretty awesome. So now, after we looked at the key components of blockchain with ton of benefits, right? Mainly all of them are coming from the cryptography. Now let's start looking at the how blockchain architecture looks like. So in this graph, we see we have a validator node and we have a member node. Again, it's all distributed. So let's talk about the basic component of the architecture. So we have a node, user or a computer within a blockchain architecture. Each has an independent copy of the whole blockchain ledger. Node can be divided into three categories. We have a simple, then we have a full node, and then we have a mining node. The simple one can just send and receive transaction and does not store the copy of the ledger, neither validates the transactions. The second one is the full node that does all of the things I just mentioned. And then the third one is mining node, which is a full node with mining capability. We'll talk about how does mining work in a little bit. What's a transaction in blockchain's world? Well, it's the smallest building block of blockchain system, records information that serves as the purpose of the blockchain. Then what is the block? Well, it's a data structure used for keeping a set of transactions which is distributed to all the nodes in the network. Then we wonder what's a chain? Well, a sequence of blocks in a specific order resulting into a chain. And finally, we come to miners. So miners, they are specific node which performs the block verification process before adding anything to the blockchain structure and then broadcasting it. They obviously get a reward for doing complex computation. So these are the basic component, and then comes the logic, the consensus protocol, a set of rules and arrangement to carry out blockchain operations. Any new record or transactions within the blockchain implies the building of a new block. Each record is then proven and digitally signed to ensure that it is genuine. Before this block is added to the network, it should be verifiable by most of the nodes in the system. Then we have Genesis block. This is the first block in the ledger. All of the following blocks in the chain are linked to the Genesis block. It generally includes the configuration for the network characteristics, the consensus protocol to be used, access control rights, the hash functions, the block size, all those logistics. So that's what, these are the basic component of the architecture. So now let's look at how the user transactions actually workflow, right? Actually, how they flow through the system. So instead of relying on a third party, such as financial institution to mediate the transactions, participant in the blockchain network uses a consensus protocol to agree on the ledger content and a cryptographic hashes and digital signature to ensure the integrity of transactions like what we just talked about. In a typical situation, the participant in the network requests a transactions. The request is broadcasted to all the computers in the network. The nodes validate the request that confirms to pre-agreed rules, the smart contracts that we talked about. Once verified, it's combined with the other transaction to produce a new block of data. New block is added to the network's blockchain. Now it is permanent. Nobody can change it. And now the transaction is complete. So that's how the typical flow of the block is. So now let's take a complete picture. So we talked about the component of the architecture and how everything fits together. So blockchain architecture, we can see it in typical the four phases, four layers. We have infrastructure, we have a platform, we have distributed computing, and we have applications. So let's understand what they are. So infrastructure, as we can understand, it's a hardware component to run blockchains such as nodes, storage, network facilities. Platform facilitates remote procedural call, RPC, and API for communication between network participants. Distributed computing is local access to the data, fault tolerant, immutability, privacy, authenticity, and security of the transactions of the data. Here is where they utilize the consensus protocol to reach to an agreement. Then finally, we have application layer, is the business logic for digital asset transactions and execution of the smart contracts. An application developed on top of the blockchain network can be accessed by the client using a platform layer. So now so after we looked at this architecture, we put all the basic block together. Now let's understand what does the user do, right? A typical user do or typical user does in a regular blockchain environment. So the user first hashes the transaction data using a hash function. The hash data is then encrypted using the user's private key to provide user authentication digital signature. The transaction data and the signature are broadcasted to the network. Each full node in the network validates the transaction by user authentication by decrypting the digital signature using the public key. Second, the data integrity by hashing the transaction data and comparing with the decrypted signature. A selected miner based on the consensus verifies the valid transaction by computing a new hash which meets the specific requirement, such as including the header of the block before and at above or below the target value. They generally use the hash value of Merkle path connecting the transactions to the Merkle root. There are many sources that are available to understand what Merkle root is. The Merkle root is a computation which is outside the scope of this presentation. But let's just understand that this is what miner does. It's a very complex mathematical computation. This mining node hashes the Merkle root, the hash value, the timestamp of the previous block has the block version and the nonce value. The miner who obtains the desired hash value adds the nonce to the block header and then broadcasts to the network. The miner whose block is valid gets updated in the ledger, receives a mining incentive. So this is the payment for computational power that it used. The incentive is divided into two parts. One is the transaction fee and one is the mining fee. A transaction fee is associated with each transaction in the block and its value is subject to the client. The mining fee is given to the miner by entire network. That's why they are motivated, right? It's like a race, like who can come up with this Merkle root computation the first, right? So the validating node verifies the block hash timestamp and adds it to its own copy of the ledger, completing the whole picture. So that's how in the blockchain, the whole thing works. So we talked about the key components of blockchain. We talked about the basic component of blockchain architecture and how everything comes together. So now let's go to the meat of this presentation is use cases of blockchain in cybersecurity. There are lots of use cases, but the most famous one, the most popular one that I found was distributed denial of service, DDoS, secure DNS, secure configuration, secure storage, software upgrade, and my favorite, the whole reason I got interested in researching about blockchain is the ransomware. So let's talk about that. On this slide, what I want you to focus on is how DDoS works on the non-distributed environment and in distributed environment, right? So on the left side, it's all in one, and then on the right side is all in a distributed environment. So a distributed denial of service attack in its simplest form is a malicious attempt to disrupt the normal traffic of a targeted server, services, or network by overwhelming the target. There are several flavors of DDoS. The most common attack is DNS amplification attack. In order to create a large amount of traffic, the attacker structures the request in a way that generates a very lengthy response from the DNS. As a result, the target receives an amplification of the attacker's initial traffic, and the network becomes clogged, causing a denial of service. Here comes our savior, the blockchain. The implementation of blockchain technology would decentralize DNS, spread the content to many of the nodes, and prevent the hackers from attacking. Domain editing rights would be granted only to the domain owners, and no other user will be permitted to make any changes. This is fantastic for us because it lowers the risk of unauthorized party being able to access or change the data. A system can ensure it is invulnerable to hackers by using blockchain to protect the data unless each node is attacked together in a very coordinated hack. And if one node is taken down, data is still accessible via other nodes within the network since all of them maintain a full copy of ledger all the time. So this is great for us that, so what, we get DDoS attack, right? We have other nodes who can help us, right? Because everybody has a full copy of the ledger. So now the second use case I studied was secure DNS. So DNS might be, a typical DNS might be subject to a cache poisoning, redirecting users to scam website, or phishing, stealing user-sensitive data through the scammed website, DNS amplification, which we just talked about, how the massive traffic from malware-infected networks to disrupt or compromise the target. So blockchain technology actually maps the hash of the domain names to the address and not the actual domain name. So which is great because even anybody gets access to it, all they will see is hash, right? Which is unreadable. The blockchain technology meets several DNS needs, right? Availability, integrity, and confidentiality. In the availability, it's a decentralized peer-to-peer network and cannot be stopped. It could replace or it could replace or complement any cost infrastructure. In the integrity, the consensus protocol of a blockchain guarantees by nature the integrity of the data. Furthermore, the data cannot be modified. These properties will eliminate the need for DNSSEC and its famous key renewal ceremony. The confidentiality is the request made to read the blockchain data can be encapsulated in HTTPS channel, the same way the DNS over HTTPS protocol. There are very few DNS over HTTPS resolver today, so traffic is centralized around a limited number of actors. The use of a blockchain would offer the possibility of querying any node on the network, thus limiting the centralization and a single point of failure. The data included in the DNS zone file, the domain name configuration, could there be distributed on a blockchain, and each player could directly interact with blockchain to manage the domain names. And this is the main idea behind the DNS in a blockchain. Very, very cool and very in a controlled environment. So now let's talk about the secure configuration. So blockchain tackles data centralization by decentralizing it. It's plain and straightforward. Blockchain distributes the data among multiple sources or nodes on the network, making unauthorized database entry through a single access point impossible. Each asset would have a cryptographically signed and forgery-proof digital identification. It provides authenticity record with absolute traceability for every firmware asset. Really, really secure. The next use case I looked at was a secure storage. So as we see, again, the whole thing here is distributed, right? We are not talking about a single place or single copy. So instead of having a single copy or single place to have the data storage, the idea here is to break up data into chunks, encrypt that data so that you are the only one with access to that. This will distribute file across the network in a way that means all of your files are available, even if the part of the network goes down. So let's look at the next slide. Then I looked at the software upgrade, right? Virus contained in software updates and other downloads are nothing new. We all are aware of that. What's new is that the malware becomes more sophisticated with new forms of emerging attack vectors every day. In terms of figures, AV Test Research Institute reports over probably 400,000 of malware detected daily. And most of these programs seem entirely harmless, right? We click on it and then we get hacked. Blockchain can prove authenticity of each download the same way it does that for any asset. By assigning a unique and immutable identifier, namely the hash string, to each program, it shows the user that software comes from a trusted provider, not some unknown source. If hacker attempts to corrupt the ID, the entire network immediately spots the action. However, even if they succeed in some way in an attempt, the corrupted string makes the related software invalid. So, aha, checkmate for our cyber criminals. So really, really cool. And this is my favorite, the ransomware use case, right? So the attackers use this to infect us, and we will actually use this to prevent ourselves. So ransomware is a category of malicious software that encrypts a user disk drive and demands some form of compensation in return for the critical data held hostage. When leveraging blockchain technology, meaning each computer in a specific blockchain network has its own copy of the database. So blockchain solution is decentralized in which there wouldn't be a single copy of the data to be held ransom, but the data could safely access from a range of privileged clients. So if the one is down, we are okay with that, right? We have other copies. So now let's review what we have talked about so far. We talked about what is a blockchain, what are the key components of the blockchain. We looked at the architecture, how the miner works and how it gets added to the network. We looked at the use cases of blockchain in cybersecurity. Now let's look at the blockchain risk, right? So just like we take any antibiotics and it has side effects, right? Nothing comes without having risk. So let's quickly go over the risk. While blockchain offers confidentiality, integrity, availability based on cryptography, the main issues still exist. Who got the keys, right? The management of those keys. I guess people can password protect it and keep it off safe somewhere, but it still has a chance of getting it stolen. We also need to take all of the precautions that we normally do to keep the key safe. As we understand and relate, humans are still the weakest link in blockchain, as they are the one who are coding blockchain. If there are coding mistake, right, developers mistake, they still make it vulnerable. We still have to have a strong blockchain coders who abide by the secure coding practices. Also, the other things to look at is that there are lots of logistics involved when deciding on a blockchain architecture. It's not easy that I said, okay, I want to go on a blockchain network and here I am. It's definitely complicated. I was working with one of the healthcare provider and I had to decide which data would be off the chain and which data will be on the chain. For example, we wouldn't record the x-rays and videos and lab results on the blockchain. Those types of data would be off the chain. So as a doctor's office, we still need to worry about protecting those off the chain data just like a traditional data. One of the biggest costs of the blockchain is the storage. As much space is needed for storing replicated distributed ledgers, we still have to have a strong cyber control. We cannot just think that, oh, because we have a blockchain and we are all safe. We don't need to have any perimeter security, firewalls or IDS or application level firewalls and AI and stuff. We still need to have all of this. There is so much more that we do not know about blockchain attack vectors, and they're still evolving. No, we are still searching. And there are lots of other things to consider. So due to many different blockchain platforms, they support different programming languages and smart contracts and structures and communication protocols, making it very difficult to interoperate between different blockchains. Yes, we have open chain, which interoperates between the public and the private blockchain network. And yeah, there is a very well documented taxonomy of blockchain architecture is also available. But the choices of the consensus protocol in the blockchain is also a tough one, right? We need to assess, right, based on scalability, complexity, cost effectiveness, energy effective, right? Because we have to always weigh our advantages versus the cost, right? Like what are we getting out of this? So blockchain is not an answer to every question that we have in the world of cybersecurity today. Obviously, there are many questions to brainstorm to see if the solution is the right one for us. If we decide it is the right one, and if we make all this decision, what data will be off the chain, on the chain, then probably blockchain is the best solution because it comes with lots of cryptographical perks. So I hope that we have learned something today. When I was researching this, I learned a lot. And I really hope we all give a chance to this technology. The more and more people adapt to this, the more and more attacks will come, the more and more different ways we'll come up with to secure it. And I guess overall it will be better off as a whole community. So I really, really appreciate you all coming here, giving me a chance, and just wanted to say thank you, really appreciate it. So let me look at the questions. How much do we have enough time?
Yeah, we have about 12 more minutes, so you're perfectly fine.
Okay.
So again, thank you right now. And if you guys have any questions with the presentation, definitely please let us know. We'll definitely work on the full screen presentation next time. So I'll go ahead and take care of that for you before you ask. And but if you have any questions for Karishma, go ahead and post it in the chats, and we'll go ahead and get those answers to the best of our ability.
Yeah, please definitely feel free to ask me any questions. I'm not an expert, but I will try my best.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'll start the questions off. For blockchain, if I wanted to learn more about the subject to understand it and possibly add that to something that I'm using or want to apply it to my career, where would you recommend that I go? What direction would you recommend that I would go in?
That's a very good question, because when I started researching on it, I'm going to be very honest. There is not a one place where you will get everything. I had to read a lot of journals and architecture articles and stuff. But I had to actually, the most I learned is from the people who actually work in blockchain. So I interviewed three professionals that I know, and actually that they taught me a lot, because when I started googling what's a blockchain, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
So I will definitely recommend, if you reach out to a person who's actually working on it, on the blockchain, that would be perfect. Like, I was very curious, like how would blockchain will look and feel like, right? So I asked one of the guy to demo me, and it was so interesting that it looked like a regular website. Like, you would have no idea that this is a blockchain. It will have username and it will have a password, and
Mhm.
then you log in, and all of this computation, the Merkle root and the miner and all, it all happens behind the curtain. You don't even know this.
Mhm.
So that was the cool part. I'm like, really, this is blockchain? It just seems like I'm logging into a Facebook, right? It's just a username and password, and or double or multi authentication, maybe the biometric and stuff. And then
Mhm.
yeah, so he actually demoed me several use cases. Like, he showed me a pharmacy blockchain, he showed me the healthcare. Then I was talking to a doctor, and then I was a part of the brainstorming session how we will do the blockchain implementation in his office. So it working in blockchain field and talking to somebody in blockchain field, that is, to me, is the best way to learn about this topic.
I can definitely understand that. Hands-on experience, I don't think you can beat that with a stick.
Yeah,
Not
that's
at all. Not at all. Um, so I'm not as familiar with blockchain, a little bit familiar with Bitcoin. I partially want to go figure out how to mine Bitcoin myself, but that's totally another dream right there.
right.
So where do you think blockchain will take us in the future? Like, say 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road or something along those lines?
I really hope so. I was reading a journal, the Switzerland Healthcare. They are actually, so they published in a journal, how their healthcare system is using the blockchain. If we want to take the full advantage of this technology, I really think that more and more people needs to be interested right now. The more and more we will use it, the more and more it will become widespread. Because right now, like for example, you wouldn't find a single bank, right, using blockchain. I don't understand why. This is such a beautiful technology. It would have been great if the banking and financial industry, they use it in a subset, like a little portion of their business. But if they can start using it full fledged, I really think the government, I mean, any industry, if we can completely build a blockchain for their entire network, then we can take the full benefit out of this. In 5 and 10 years, I truly hope that we really start using this.
That sounds awesome. I definitely appreciate that answer. It looks like Kathy she gave us some information. A person by the name of Gurinder Singh Man. He is very informed about blockchain and the classes and information. Have you heard of him before?
I have not. I am planning to attend the IBM Blockchain Summit. It's coming in middle of the November.
Okay.
So hopefully, and it is IBM. So hopefully he will be there. And this is a fascinating topic for sure. There's a lot more to learn for sure.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So I'll reach out to our guys one more time. Do you have any other questions for Karishma, or any comments or thoughts or anything along those lines? Alright. I don't see anything posted just yet, but I just want to say thank you very much. We definitely appreciate the information that you've given us and provided to us.